Hi everyone, my name's Alex and this is Tank Tested. Can everyone hear me okay? I hate to do that at the start of every stream, but I think it's kind of important. While I wait for everyone, hopefully I get some positive feedback soon, today I'll be setting up a Wabi Kusa. I'll give it a second before we go into any further, but you can see that I've got one camera here and one camera here. So that way you can see what I'm up to, and also you can see a close-up version of our setup so that you can actually see what I'm working on as well. So I'll wait just a second and see whether or not anyone is it's good. All good here. Great. So for everyone that isn't already familiar, a Wabi Kusa is a style of, well, aquascaping adjacent, where you use a ball like this, and we'll talk about how you can make a ball like this. And you create a immersed growth setup where the plants are growing out of a ball like this, and they're kind of growing of their own accord. And the idea there is that a ball like this can kind of do what it wants to do, and you just kind of have to be happy with what it's done. So to that regard, I have about 8 plants over here, which you guys can't see, that I will be highlighting, that I'll be planting into this bowl, or into this Wabi Kusa ball, and we'll see what happens. Some of them may make it, some of them may not. I've selected all plants that can grow immersed, and immersed means not fully submerged, not underwater. But who knows? A lot of these plants may struggle to transition, and it's okay. It's okay if some of them don't make it. Some of them will. Yeah, so let me address everyone in the comments right now. New glasses. Yeah, I actually bought a bunch of glasses a few months ago. That's kind of how I move through the world. I wear the same glasses for a couple of years, and then I buy a whole new set of like 3 or 4 frames, and I rotate between them based on, I don't know, what I'm feeling like and whether or not I think it complements what I'm wearing. So yeah, these are a different set of glasses than I think I wore in the last video. Yeah. All right, so let's get started with this process. One of the first things that you want to do when you're setting up a Wabi Kusa bowl or ball is create the ball itself. So this ball was actually created for me, and it was created for me by a company called Studio Aquatica. Now, Studio Aquatica actually specializes in substrate balls and Wabi Kusa balls. And this is basically just a bunch of peat moss that's tightly bound around what I imagine is some sort of substrate ball. Not 100% sure. But that's basically what a Wabi Kusa ball is. Now, you can make your own Wabi Kusa ball a couple of different ways. You can make it by mixing your own substrate, a mix of, I guess, potting soil, aqua soil. You can look up recipes for how major organizations make Wabi Kusa balls, because these are actually a pretty common way of jump-starting plants. And then you wrap it all in some sort of material. It could be something that is resistant to rot or is impossible to rot, like a synthetic material, or it could be something that's more able to rot, like a fine cloth, like cheesecloth, for instance. Now, the issue with that is that the plants really need to take hold before the cheesecloth rots away, because if they don't, you'll just end up with a muddy ball or muddy pile in your bowl. But I'm lucky. I have this little ball that you can buy from Studio Aquatica. They're really lovely. I have one over in my kitchen already. So we can start this process. Hi, everyone. So what I have here is the first step of the process. I'm going to show this to the camera now. This is a set of basically twine. It's actually a filament. It's not that dissimilar to a fishing line, although this is green as to blend in with the material that we're working with. And my plan for this is to wrap the Wabi Kusa ball in this filament. And in the process, I'm going to wrap in some moss. The moss will be the base for this ball. And I am going to be using this. This is Christmas moss. I think this will make a nice base for this this Wabi Kusa. Now, it may take a little while for it to transition, but I think it'll do pretty well. I've had aquatic mosses do quite well in the past. And for you guys' reference, once this is all done, I will be filling it up to about this rim line. So this ball will be slightly immersed, but it will be super saturated in water. So the moss will do just fine. So from there, why don't we start this process now? It's a nice, very simple process. It does not take a lot of effort. And I don't have that much moss, but that's okay. You don't need too much. So I'm just starting the process. See, I've loaded up my moss ball. And now I will grab my filament here, and I will just start tightly wrapping it. With moss, you can actually pretty tightly wrap. You don't need to worry about constricting the moss, because moss is pretty resilient and will grow out of all of little tendrils, which have a name. I've forgotten what those little growth patches are called. I probably should have unwrapped this twine before I started, but here we are. It's fine. Now, when you're wrapping your ball, half of it is going to be sitting on the floor of your bowl. So you don't need to cover the entire thing in your material. All you need is just enough to cover the top. And obviously, just like any aquatic bowl or any aquatic setup, the plants will eventually grow in. So you don't need to worry too much about having it too full. Within a few months, all of this will be one dense patch of green. And the moss is basically just a base anyway. If the plants do quite well, you'll barely see the moss at all. I really should have unwrapped this from my little twine, or my little holder here. The nice thing about the Studio Aquatica setup is that it actually comes with this. And one of my favorite bits of this, which again, this is not sponsored, but I really enjoy their products. It comes with this little hook. And this little hook allows me to, once I'm done, I don't have to tie off this twine. I can just jam it into the ball, which makes this a nice, really relaxing process. It means that while I'm in front of you guys, I don't have to worry too much about messing up. So now that I've kind of wrapped the beginnings of this ball, I want to start with some plants that I don't want to jam into the ball. You can do two things when you're planting. You can either use a set of pincettes or pincers or tweezers and jam your plants into this ball so that the roots are settled and close to the nutrients, or you can tie them onto the top or the surface of the ball. Now, there are two plants that I know that I need to tie off. One is Anubias nano, I believe. So this is just a single leaf of an Anubias plant. This is kind of a leftover from a previous project that I had. I'm not super confident this is gonna make it. It's decently healthy, but it is only one flower or one leaf. So I'm okay kind of sacrificing it to the greater cause of this project. So because the Anubias is a rhizome plant, you don't want to jam the roots into the ball. The rhizome actually needs to be exposed and on the surface. So nice and simple, I can just kind of tie it down. So I just go over it with my string and secure it, say twice. And now it's nice and attached. So now I've got a nice ball with a leaf attached to it. Yeah, it's nice and cute. Before I move on any further, I'm gonna catch up on the comments and see if anyone has left any questions or any concerns. So just say hello to everyone. Hi folks, I'm a Wabi Kusa failure. Hi Ginger. Yeah, so Wabi Kusa, I think it's not quite as simple as it seems for sure. Generally how I operate is I'll put a bunch of stuff on it and what makes it makes it. That's not how I would operate if they were animals, but with plants I feel okay with kind of saying some of them aren't going to make it. But generally a couple of things will, and then you just have to let it live. A Wabi Kusa can take a year or two to really take form, and that's okay. So There are only 32 or 30 watching and only 10 likes. I agree. That is lunacy. There should be many more likes. So hello to everyone. It's Anubias Nana Petite. Yeah, thank you. So the other plant that I'm going to plant in here that has a rhizome is this bulbitis. So this is a nano variety of bulbitis. I'm not sure what it's marketed as or what it's sold as in the hobby. This is a leftover piece from an aquarium that I actually kind of got bored with and emptied almost everything out. And there were a couple of plants left over that kind of just stayed there. It was just sitting in a aquarium slowly evaporating. So this plant has already been exposed to air for most of its life. The rhizome was always submerged, but the leaves were not. Now, a lot of people, I think I've seen debate at least about whether or not the bulbitis can actually stay in its dwarf form. But I've had this for about 2 years, maybe longer, and it's never grown bigger than this. So this is just a little chunk of the rhizome that I pulled off. So again, rhizome plant, all these roots here will eventually adhere to the Wabi Kusa ball, but I want to have the rhizome on the surface. So how long does it take you to set up a tank? I'm thinking like 2 weeks because you seem to be a perfectionist. That's a good question. The actual process of setting up a tank only takes a couple of hours, I would say. But the process of thinking about setting up a tank takes me a really long time. For instance, I'm still looking at 150. I have drawn out blueprints for the 150, but I've had that tank in my living room since October. I'm hoping that in the next 2 to 3 weeks, I will have it up and running. But yeah, that's how long it takes me. So that's an answer for Alex breeding fish. It takes me forever. All right, so again, just trying to secure the rhizome of the bulbitis into my ball. And then I take the little hook. I don't know if you can see this little hook. I take the little hook and I just jam it into the ball like that. And that's it. So now I've got 2 plants in my Wabi Kusa. I'm only 10 minutes into this live stream, so I better slow way down or this is going to be a very short live stream. So if you have any questions, ask away because I need to fill time. Not that I want this to just be the most boring live stream in the world, but I also don't want it to be over in 20 minutes and just have you guys stare at this little Wabi Kusa for the next half hour after that. Tank Friends asks, how many tanks do you have now? Well, before the quarantine started, I only had the 150. I mean, that's not really true. I have a couple of nano tanks in my kitchen that aren't really for anything other than storing plants. In my kitchen, I have a 10-gallon Dennerle tank. It's actually the tank that I used in one of the very first videos I uploaded to this channel. And in that tank, I just have a bunch of 1.5-inch pots, plastic terrestrial plant pots. And in those pots, I have aqua soil and then a bunch of little pieces of lava rock. And tied to that lava rock is my entire collection of Bucephalandra. I've talked about this many times before. I no longer collect Bucephalandra. I don't think it's ethical because unless you can properly source that the Bucephalandra is captive bred and raised, meaning that it was cultivated from a tissue culture, I don't think it's okay to buy Boost because it is being harvested from the wild in an unsustainable fashion. But since I have a large collection of it from prior to my awareness of that, I don't feel like I can throw it away, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with it. I might do a whole tank setup on it and talk more in depth about that. So I have that tank, but it's not a beautiful tank. It's literally just a bunch of boosts in little containers, and I'm not pumping CO2 in there, so the boost isn't growing at a rapid rate. It's kind of a really boring tank, and I've had that up the whole time. But other than that, I have the 150. Now I have a 10-gallon tank that I set up in my previous live stream that LRB Aquatics sent me all the plants for. I have planted it. I am probably going to film an update on that in the next few days and post that to this channel sometime soon. That's it for aquatic setups though. So as this quarantine goes on, I may end up with more and more because I get bored, but I was trying to get rid of absolutely everything. Now I'm falling back. So what material is the twine? Hi, Katie. So the twine is, it's basically fishing line. It's monofilament. It won't deteriorate over time, which is, it's not great, but you can easily do it with thread, with a thick thread, or even a waxed thread. A waxed thread would last a little bit longer, and that would allow you to keep the twine around for a couple of months before it rotted away. That's plenty of time for the plants to root. So the twine is just kind of overkill right now. Yeah, so I've just answered Katie's follow-up. Yeah, you could definitely use some other material. And in terms of making one of these Wabi Kusa balls yourself, again, Studio Aquatica, they're lovely, not a sponsor, but it's a really nice setup. One of these balls I think costs around $20, which sounds a little bit steep until you try to set up one of these by yourself. And then you realize that it's a lot of materials that go into it and a lot of time. And that $20 feels pretty worth it. But if you wanted to set it up by yourself and you have the materials on hand, you can totally do that pretty easily. All right, so I think I've, okay. Sorry, I'm just gonna catch up on all these questions. John Gallagher asks, what do you think of island aquascapes? Do you have a favorite aquascape style? I like island aquascapes, and it's actually something that I'm considering for the 150 because I've built it as a peninsula aquarium with 3 sides exposed. So an island is kind of a perfect setup. In terms of island aquascapes for like competition, for photo competitions, they're not great just because they don't have the depth. But for in-person viewing, an island aquascape is really great. It allows you to walk around and see lots of different angles. Photo contest aquascapes are really only viewable from one angle, and they're often not that appealing in person, actually. So some of the aquariums that I film actually look way better in person because they're more open. And then some aquariums that I film look way better on camera because they're actually really claustrophobic in person. So that's a little insight. I will continue answering questions in a second, but I'm going to move on to planting one more plant in here. What do I want to go with? So I'm going to go with pennywort. So this is pennywort. This is grown aquatic. So I'm hoping that it will make it in a terrestrial form. I'm actually going to just snap it in half. And I'm going to attach both sections to this Wabi Kusa ball. Now I'm out of twine, so how I'm going to attach it. So I'm going to use these little pincers, these little tweezers. And I actually went to a metal shop when the metal shop near my house was still open. Sorry, I just touched the mic. And I ground these down so that they've got a nice sharp point. I don't know if you can see that, but these are sharper than more common aquascaping pincets. And that's because I like to be able to jam things into the substrate with them. So what I do is you kind of create a hole. It's okay to kind of beat up the ball a little bit. You create a hole, drill a little hole, and then you jam your plant in that hole. And hopefully the plant will root and attach itself to the ball. So that's basically what I'm doing there. I'm now realizing that I've forgotten a critical step. It's not actually a critical step, but it's a step that I want to do nonetheless. So we may have to rewind way back. So I got these sticks together. Some nice little sticks, great little sticks. I wanted to use them to create some accent around this ball, so there was something more than just plants. And my plan was to attach them using the twine. But I've already used the twine. So now what do I do? I'm going to answer a couple of questions. Let me know in the comments, do you want to put up with me unwinding this twine and reattaching these sticks, or do you want me to just push forward? While you guys let me know, I'm going to continue answering some of these questions. So can you over soak the Wabi Kusa ball? I forgot mine for about 24 hours. No, I don't think that you can. So I've actually been soaking this for around 2 days. I think that generally you need to soak one of these commercially made Wabi Kusa balls for an hour or two prior to planting. But the Wabi Kusa bowl is going to be in 2 or 3 inches of water for the duration of its life, so you can't really over soak it. Plants want to be wet. Most of these are aquatic plants anyway. In fact, all the plants I'm using are aquatic plants. All right, so what are your thoughts on owning green sunfish? What are my thoughts on owning green sunfish? I don't have thoughts on that. I've kept dwarf sunfish in the past. I've struggled to get them to eat. They, in my experience, are super picky and will only eat live food. So that's my like only bit of insight is, in my experience, the sunfish that I've kept require live food to stay happy. So that's something you got to sign up for. Let's see. Would I ever do a big filterless planted tank? I almost said I would not. I have done close before. So aquariums kind of need filtration no matter what. Plants, in theory, reduce the load that you need, but aquariums need filtration no matter what for a couple of reasons. One, you do need a sense of movement in the aquarium. You'll end up with dead spots and you'll end up with areas that have really low oxygen if you don't have movement. The other thing that filtration provides is it breaks the water surface, and that allows for air to dissolve into the water column. And you'd think, okay, well, if I just have any sort of surface movement, it's fine. But the reality is that film oil will build up on the surface of the water and completely block any transmission of oxygen and CO2 into the water column. So you do still have to have some sort of movement. The other thing is that plants don't absorb nearly as much nutrients as animals produce, at least not in an aquarium setup. So having that extra filtration is really important. That said, I have done tanks with almost no filtration, and I've used them as tanks that I've had shrimp in. So I've had heavily planted tanks that have shrimp, and actually I'll show you one of the plants that I'm about to use in the future. I've had floating plants as well cover the surface of the water. So there's almost no evaporation. There's very little oxygen being let into the water column, but the shrimp seem to do pretty fine. And the key with shrimp, at least in my experience, is to not do anything to them. So having a very, very stable system with minimal filtration is okay. Still, I think at that point, I had something moving water around. I don't remember if it was a micro bubbler or if I had a tiny like jet filter underwater, but I had something moving some of the water around so that I stopped a full film from covering the surface of the water. Okay, so does anyone want me to rewind the twine? All right, let's rewind the twine. So unfortunately, we're going to have to undo those 2 steps that we did, but they're pretty simple steps. I think we can redo them pretty easily. So I still have all of my Christmas moss attached to my Wabi Kusa ball, but now I want to add a couple of accent sticks. Again, in the spirit of Wabi Kusa, I don't want to think too hard about the process. I just kind of want to add a couple of sticks that create a little sense of energy, a little sense of movement in my little Wabi Kusa ball. I don't want to go too fancy. Maybe 3 sticks? Does 3 feel appropriate? Yeah, let's do 3. This is where I need a third hand though. Sorry, I touched the mic again. Okay. Do one more loop. Great. It's okay. I probably should have done a lot more twine wrapping, but it is what it is. So I'll start by getting my Anubias back attached. Come on. We'll jam that Anubias right here. Attach it on the ball. And then we'll also attach our bulbitis right here, let's say. Sorry, I'm totally out of frame. This is what happens when I get even mildly flustered by the process. And we'll jam it back in. Unclear if that made it better or worse, but it did do something. It looks different, so there's that. So now I've got a little setup like this. So my Wabi Kusa hopefully has a little bit of a sense of movement to it. All the sticks are moving in one direction. Now I'm going to continue the process of planting my plants. So I'm going to go back to planting a second little piece of pennywort into my tank. I've got to figure out which direction it grows from. Looks like it grows from here. Okay. So again, I'm gonna dig out a little hole. I gotta pick it up. I'm gonna dig out a little hole, and then I will jam my pennywort in that hole. Okay. So right now this looks a bit of a hot mess. That's okay. I'm okay with that. It's allowed to look not the best. That's kind of the point. In the interest of trying to get my ball to sit upright a little bit, I may at some point add one of these. So these are also included in the Studio Aquatica kit, and they're actually meant to hang on the back of glass. But for me, I'm gonna try to use them as kind of a little tripod to hold the ball up and stop it from rolling around. So now that I've caught up on that, let's see if we have any questions. So leftover practice suture. Yes. So Katie asked if she could use leftover practice suture for making a Wabi Kusa ball, and I think absolutely. How much maintenance is the Wabi Kusa? So almost none. I'm actually going to have this lovely top to this cloche. I think that's how it's pronounced. So I will be encapsulating it like so. And then I'll just keep the water line where it needs to be, and that's about it. It's got these 2 little holes so it won't rot, essentially, so I won't be trapping all of the air in there, or all of the water in there. and it should allow me to see in the container. But in realistically maybe a year, this whole thing will be completely filled. So you have to do a little bit of trimming, but not much. It's a pretty simple process. So, sorry, did you answer my question already? Here it is again. I live in California, and there aren't many companies that deliver plants to my area. Do you have any alternate recommendations? Cloud 9.5. So, yeah, I do actually. Local clubs is the way to go. I don't know where in California you live, but local clubs are the way to go. I really heavily rely on my local clubs, Guapa, and there are a couple of other local clubs that are more fish focused, but still very much have aquatic plants on occasion. Now, the other thing is that when you say that there aren't many companies that deliver plants to my area, where in California do you live that there aren't companies that deliver plants to your area? In my experience, there are a lot of people that would deliver plants, although it depends. If you're in a super rural area, it's possible that the delivery time might be the issue, but I can't imagine that being the case. There are a lot of plant companies online. I'm not going to plug any one of them individually, but I would really recommend trying to find a local club. Most aquarium clubs tend to have at least one or two people that have plants, and they're generally pretty willing to give you some of them. Do you think Bucephalandra and Anubias are good for Wabi Kusa? So I have seen people keep both in Wabi Kusa. I have never successfully kept either, but I'm going to try this time. And I think the biggest thing is that they tend to dry out. But because I've got this lid, I should be able to keep the humidity high enough that they don't dry out. Bucephalandra actually lives in streams and on stream banks, so it can live quite happily outside of the water. It's just a matter of transitioning it so that it has leaves that can retain water, because a lot of the aquatic leaves, not only do they not have the structure to stand upright without water, they rely on floating, they also don't have leaves that have a waxy enough surface, so they'll dry out very quickly. So the plant needs to transition to terrestrial life, but if you can make that happen, you're good to go. Words are hard. Yeah, they are hard. Redoing something to the point of perfection is the essence of the aquarium hobby. I think that's probably true, although I think the other essence of the aquarium hobby is kind of throwing your hands up and saying, whatever, it is what it is, and walking away. So on that note, I'm going to add one more plant to the mix. I'm going to add a couple more, but I'm going to start with my favorite. I'm going to start with guapa grass. This is a hair grass. It can live in a terrestrial form, or at least in immersed form. I'm unsure if it's going to be able to make that transition, but it might. It might. It has in the past for me, but usually it's because I've left it in a place where the water level of the tank drops below where the plant is, and the tips of it get exposed. So I'm going to plant it a little bit low and in the back, because I think this is going to be the front of the Wabi Kusa. So I think I'll plant it back here amongst my my roots, and we'll see if I can make something happen that way. Now again, this will take a while to get settled. Gosh, I did not tie any of this tight enough. This is a hot mess of a root system, but that's okay. I'm not planning on touching it too often. But I should have tied it way, way tighter. I just was not thinking. Come on. So I've got my little bit of guapa grass jammed in there. This is falling apart as we speak. It's okay. It's fine. Is it fine? I'm not happy with it, but I'm going to call it fine in the interest of my own sanity. Ugh, it's really falling apart. It is what it is, I guess. It's not what it is. I'm going to have to redo it. This is driving me insane. All right, guys. We're going to see how quickly I can redo a Wabi Kusa in like a few seconds. And how much time I've killed. Because really a Wabi Kusa doesn't take more than a few minutes to set up fully. I've just been slow walking it, moseying, having a chit chat with you guys, but we can do this a lot faster, so why don't we? All right. My pennywort has survived this whole process though, so I must have planted that really, really well. All right, let's start by tying down our Nubius. Boom, it's tied down. Let's tie down our Balbitis. It's tied down. Now let's tie down our sticks. I'm doing this too high. Let me actually lower it so that you can see what I'm doing. I'll wrap this around like that. There we go. Maybe do this one here and this one here. Yeah, that's okay. I'm tempted to use some thread to help me out here, but I know that the thread's going to rot eventually, and these sticks are going to get loose anyway. So I'm debating whether or not I want to suck it up and just say, that's okay, it is what it is, for the purposes of this live stream. Because I could just redo this endlessly, but what is that going to get me, really? Because that's no tighter than it was before. In fact, it might be looser. Well, the good news is I have some thread, so why not use it? All right. Although getting this one undone is its own problem. So why don't we use one with a bobbin? Where are you, thread end? Where are you? I found the wrong end of the bobbin. It's not helpful. So while I struggle with this, let me see if there are any questions. Can the person at the aquarium, local aquarium store, can you ask the person at the aquarium store to order whatever they need? Yeah, I think generally aquarium stores can order as needed for a lot of setups. Now, hopefully they have an existing relationship with someone that does plants, if that's what you're after. But yeah, if you build a relationship with your local aquarium store, you can generally get them to order what you need. The issue that a lot of them have is that the ordering costs are high enough that they don't want to order something unless they know that you're actually going to come pick it up. So they may make you pay for it in advance. But I don't think that's unreasonable, frankly, especially if you're planning on saying, hey, I want these 7 types of plants. I think that most aquarium shops would be happy for the business of guaranteed business. And it might actually encourage them to buy plants if they've never bought plants before. I think a lot of aquarium shops that don't have plants, their reasoning is that they're worried that their area doesn't have a robust plant hobby. And as a result, they don't want to carry them because they are a live good. It's not like a fish food that could just sit on the shelf. It is a live thing that will go bad if it doesn't sell. So I think there's that concern. But yeah, I think that you'd be totally within your right to ask them. So yeah, let's see. Where did you get the container? Where did I get the container? I got the container from a local garden center, actually. I got the container from the same place that I bought my carnivorous plants from about a month and a half ago, which is a local garden shop in the DC area. So with that, now I've got the unfortunate business of I have to tie this off at some point. But luckily, I'm willing to be a monster and use my mouth to cut the thread. So tying it off shouldn't be too much of a problem. Okay. I feel that that is acceptable. And it's more stable too. All right. So there we go. Definitely going to need some support now because I've made it all off kilter. So let's jam this guy in there. I'm going to use this little bracket to support myself. Let's see. Boom. Look at that. It's kind of a thing. So I've got my setup. I'm feeling okay about that. The pennywort is going to hang into the water. That's okay. I'm going to use one more of my brackets if I can find it. Put it over here. The brackets will eventually get completely covered with algae anyway, so they should disappear. Yeah, there we go. That feels pretty good. Let's see if I can put it in my lid. Boom. That looks okay. So, what's inside the Wabi Kusa? Well, inside this Wabi Kusa, I believe, is a mixture of clay and soil, but I'm not actually sure. I've never actually cut open one of these. But when you build your own Wabi Kusa, inside is usually a mix of powder soil, aqua soil, and some sort of clay stabilizer. That's generally what I've used in the past. Recipes may vary though, and I think that once you find a system that works for you, that's what you should use. The reality is that there's not really a right way to do it. There's a couple of right ways to do it. I know people that use materials that decompose over time, and I've tried that and had everything become a mess. And then I know people that use synthetic materials, and I've tried that as well, and it's worked okay, but it's not necessarily something I'd do again. So, yeah. All right, let's jam in our pennywort one last time. We're actually going to do it this time. This is actually the last time this pennywort is going in this Wabi Kusa, because we've got other plants to move on to. Well, that didn't go in, but it will. All right. So, anyone have any more questions? Nature take the wheel, that's my method. I think that's a fair method. Frankly, fighting what the thing wants to do gets exhausting eventually. And honestly, these plants are gonna do what they wanna do anyway. Some of them are gonna live, some of them aren't. Moving on to the next plant that I want, I think I'm gonna go with Rotala colorata, excuse me. This was a plant that LRB Aquatics sent me. It's a plant that can grow immersed. It's a beautiful red plant. And LRB grows everything without CO2, which is kind of appealing. I'll probably be using some of this in another Aquascape sometime soon, although it is relatively fast growing underwater, and I generally don't like fast-growing plants because I don't want to do that much maintenance. Terrestrially, we'll see whether or not this transitions. It has a decent shot because it does have roots growing out of its stem, so it's possible that it will survive. I'm dubious that it will, but I'm willing to give it a shot. Now, it's a pretty bushy plant, so I'm going to plant it out in the back of the bowl. And I'm going to plant it trying to keep in mind maybe right around the water line of the Wabi Kusa so that the root system stays underwater. That probably isn't necessary for a plant that's already been grown immersed, but for something that's already aquatic, feels like why not give it the best start that it can and let most of it be underwater. So I'm going to jam a couple more stems of the rotella into this ball. And we're starting to get something that looks kind of like something. I mean, it's chaos, but it's something. So, all right. You can't stick it in the side of the ball. You can stick it in the side of the ball. So if you stick it in the side of the ball, oftentimes what the plants will do is they'll actually grow along the surface of the water. They'll actually kind of float in the water. And it gives it kind of a lovely look. It's not quite the same as a bushy growth, but it's a nice look nonetheless. Have you tried the carnivore Wabi Kusa they make? I haven't tried the carnivorous Wabi Kusa they make. So the main difference between those two would be this one actually has quite a bit of nitrogen in the center of the ball, whereas the Wabi Kusa that's designed for carnivorous plants wouldn't have that nitrogen. It would probably be, my guess is that the carnivorous Wabi Kusa is probably all peat. Maybe there's some clay in the center, some like low nutrient clay. But there's probably not much organic in the center because that would kill the carnivorous plants. So how do you get hooked up with National Geographic? I like that question because it's my job. So I started at Nat Geo back in 2011. I've left Nat Geo once. I'm back now. But I left Nat Geo in 2016 after producing a digital series for them called Wildlife with Birdie Gregory. It's still online. It's a series that I'm really, really proud of, but it really, really exhausted me. It was so much work. It was the first natural history series that Nat Geo had ever produced as a digital series. It was kind of inventing the wheel for a new platform. And as a result, it really exhausted me. So I wanted a break, and I took an easier job somewhere else for a bit. But a few years ago, I decided, well, I really love Nat Geo, and I'm privileged enough that I was able to get back in. So I came back to Nat Geo, and now I help make their live shows for the stage. So I work with explorers and photographers and scientists to build educational and entertainment shows that tour around the country. It's a really cool gig. I'm not sure that I'm allowed to actually talk about it on this live stream though, but shush, don't spread the word. I have all positive things to say, but I'm not sure that I'm actually supposed to talk about it. I also produced a series that I just posted a video about called Modern Explorer, which I am going to talk about. And that show I produced with my friend Alize Carrere, who is a wonderful Nat Geo explorer. She focuses on how people adapt to climate change or environmental change, as she likes to put it. And we went to South Georgia. I didn't get to go. But the show goes to South Georgia and the Falkland Islands, and we tell the story of penguins and fur seals and elephant seals, and my favorite explorer, which is Ernest Shackleton. It's a really great series. I posted a link to it in the video that I posted yesterday. If you haven't checked it out, I encourage you to go check it out. It represents a lot of work, and a lot of the show was actually shot in my apartment, believe it or not. So, in fact, pretty much exactly right here is where most of the tabletop stuff was filmed. So, yeah. So I really enjoyed your National Geographic piece. You're so talented and creative. I love learning along with you. That's so kind, Mary. It's nice to read a compliment to yourself. It's kind of awkward, but thank you so much. I really appreciate that. The show was a lot of work, but I'm really, really proud of what we came up with. And the goal is for it to be an educational tool for kids in like middle school and high school. So I hope that we can inspire a next generation of people to care about our planet. JC Aquatic, hello everyone. I hope you're all doing well and staying safe. I agree. I'm doing these live streams because I want us to all have a sense of community as we're stuck here potentially alone, potentially for long periods of time. And I want us to try to find ways that we can do something without leaving the house. So all of these are plants that I already had on hand. Obviously, you don't necessarily have the bowls and the Wabi Kusa structures, but hopefully it inspires you to create something with whatever you do have laying around. So one more plant that I'm going to add to the mix is pearlweed. Pearlweed is another aquatic plant that JRB Aquatics sent me. It again can have a terrestrial form. It grows quickly, so I think this will probably take over if it gets a foothold. But if it does, it does. That's fine. That's kind of the point of Wabi Kusa, right? Is to let it do what it wants to do. So I want to plant a little bit of pearlweed up here at the front. I'm kind of hoping that it drapes over and hangs into the water column, actually. That would be a great look for it. I don't necessarily want it to grow upwards, but I don't have much of a say in what it does. So again, kind of drilling out a hole with my pincets. And then I'm going to go in and jam a couple of stems in there. I want to try to get some of the root systems of this plant into the hole. That's not strictly necessary, but anything that I can do that helps the plant get a foothold, I want to do. The actual process from going from planted to something that's flourishing actually does, in my experience, take a little bit of time, because the plant spends a lot of energy rooting at first. So if you can get your plant to happily root, you've done most of the heavy lifting, and eventually the plant will just kind of carry on and do its own thing without your help. That means that for the first few weeks, when you have a Wabi Kusa, you want to mist it pretty regularly. You want to keep the entire surface of the ball wet and the leaves from drying out. So that's really the thing that you're most at risk of when you're first starting out with your Wabi Kusa bowl, is that the plants inside are not going to make it because they're just a little bit too exhausted, or they dry out, and you want to try to prevent that as best you can. So, all right. Any other questions that anyone's got? Mary says, just saying hello. I really enjoy your National Geographic. Yeah, I already read that. I already complimented myself with your comment, so thank you. Do you remember the name of the garden center? I want to say it's Merrifield. Merrifield. That feels like the right answer. Not 100% sure. I believe there are 3 Merrifield garden centers in the DC area, which is where I'm based. So I hope that helps you. Probably doesn't help you right now as we're in the midst of a lockdown, but hopefully it helps you maybe this summer. Because Virginia is on a lockdown until June 10th, the very earliest. So I think that we're approaching the end point of this Wabi Kusa, or setting up this Wabi Kusa. It's kind of a mess right now, but that's okay. it'll become something over time. It doesn't look too bad on camera actually, but it'll get there. Now, what I want to do is add some water. So I've got some water that I've dechlorinated, which that's probably not necessary, honestly. There are no animals in this system, and the plants don't need it to be dechlorinated generally. So it's probably an unnecessary step, but it's okay. So I'm going to add my 2 big cups of water. Now, off camera, I'm probably going to do a couple of water changes to get rid of all the gunk that's built up in this bowl. But that'll be for off camera. I also want to add a couple of floating plants into my system. So I can never remember what the species name of this is, but it's not duckweed. It starts with an S. It's native to North America. I think this particular species, it comes from Florida, although it may come from all over the East Coast. So with that, I've got a couple of floating plants. They'll divide every 3 to 4 days. So every 2 weeks or so, I'm going to have to come in and remove a bunch of them. They're really good at sucking out any excess nitrogen in the water. Yeah, salvinia is what it's called. That might not be how it's pronounced, but that is what it's called. So right now, I think my water is a little bit low. So I'm going to add a little bit more water from my mugs to bring it up to where I want it to be. Because I want everything to have the best chance that it can. So for now, I'm going to pretty much submerge my Wabi Kusa. Over time, once these plants have gotten a firm setting, they'll be able to handle a little bit less water saturation. But for now, I'm going to let them have all the water that they can. Now, I'm going to put this in my little, let's call it a cloche, I think. And we will call this kind of a finished product. So I'm going to take my paper towel and I'm going to clean up around my little Wabi Kusa. And maybe we can move it a little bit closer to camera and let you see what I see. So I'll rotate all the way around and we'll see what the system looks like. You may have addressed this, but if you have to drill a hole in the substrate balls, is it not too dense for the roots to take hold? I have no experience with Wabi Kusa. Okay, so that's a good question. It's not so hard that it's really impossible to drill into, and that's why you actually want to soak it first. You want to soak the ball for a couple of hours to a couple of days before you actually plant it. But I didn't have to press too hard with these pincettes, so I wouldn't worry too much about the roots not being able to penetrate. Now, if I were to make this out of a hard clay ball, that would be a concern for sure. And that's actually why you want to have a mix when you make them from scratch of clay, soil, and aqua soil, because you want a little bit of the solidity that the clay brings. You want it to be able to hold together, but you don't want it to be so tight that the roots can't penetrate. That said, plants are really, really good at growing through tough surfaces, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Yeah, so this is my final setup. I think we are hitting 1 hour. So I will wrap up just by saying, if you want to make your own Wabi Kusa, Studio Aquatica, right there. They're a great, very small local company in, I want to say North Carolina. And I think it's a really great product. So if you want to make your own, I think now would be a great time to look into whether or not you can get them. I don't know. I don't know whether or not he's operating right now, but he may be. So I will put this in my windowsill. I'm going to put this a bit farther away from my southern facing window than I would for a terrestrial system, just because I don't want it to get fully overrun with algae. But I'll put it so that it gets a couple of hours of sunlight a day. And from there, this tank should kind of thrive. So I wouldn't expect an update on this for a few months, maybe close to a year. Realistically, it takes a while for this to set in, but once it starts to grow, it really grows. And a year from now, hopefully, this whole bulb will be filled with plants. And then I can debate whether or not I want to have it exposed or inside of the bulb. So with that, I hope you really enjoyed this live stream. I hope that you're staying safe. And if you, for some reason, are watching this and haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button. So thanks so much, everyone. Have a great night.